Hello, Mr. Anderson.
Hello there. How are you doing?
Sorry about being a little bit late. It's our first podcast.
That's okay. No problem. Are we live already for the whole audience, or it's just the two of us?
Oh, it's just this. So we are alive for the whole audience, just the two of us. And it's going to be amazing because I am going to be interviewing the writer of all books.
Yeah, that's great. So,
Yes.
but the audience is not yet uh, watching.
No, no, they're watching. Yes, everyone's watching.
Everyone's watching. Okay, so let's start then. Okay,
Yes, a
great.
lot of
Yeah.
people are saying hi.
Hi there. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, the chat is showing here to me. People have been saying wonderful things about your books before the live started.
Oh, great. Wow, good to hear that.
Yes, a lot of people tuned in, which is amazing. So we're very excited to have you on our podcast.
And I am very excited to be in the podcast as well, right?
Yes. So tell me a little bit about your background as a writer because that's what everyone's been dying to know.
Okay, right. So first of all, Deborah, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this podcast. It's a great pleasure to be here and talking to an audience from all over the world. I usually speak to readers from Brazil, from readers who read Portuguese, but this is a great opportunity I have of speaking to people who are not necessarily in the country where I live, where I'm speaking from, Brazil, in the city of São Paulo. I'm a writer. I'm a teacher as well. I'm a writer. I've published 4 books, 3 novels, and one short story anthology, right? Anthology. And my first novel is Rua Direita. It's the Bright Road novel. The second novel, or the first novel was published in 2013. My second novel is Avenida Paulista 22. In English, it would be 22 Paulista Avenue, published in 2019. And my latest novel was published this year in March, called Professoras, Teachers, in 2023. And I also have a short story anthology called O Livro Que Não Escrevi, the book I never wrote, published in 2016, right? I'm also a playwright, author of 4 plays. One of them is called Elevator to Heaven. Another one called 3 by Room, Três por Quarto. Another one called Junk Chest, Baú de Tranqueiras. And another one called well, it's hard to pronounce it in English. Wind's Drum, right? Quarto Feitos de Cinza. It's like a word that was invented. Um, that's it there.
Yeah, that's not just it. That's a lot of things. So we are amazed to have you here. And I did say I was going to reveal a surprising thing on this podcast. And that surprise is that you were my teacher in high school.
That's right. Yes.
Do you
So
remember how it was a little bit to teach me? I know that was like decades ago, but maybe you'll remember a little bit about it.
was it decades ago? I thought it was like 1 decade ago.
I mean, decades ago, as in like an
Yeah,
exaggeration.
something like that, right? Maybe over a decade. Yes, I do remember that you were. I think it was in grade 10 that you had lessons with me, Portuguese literature lessons, and I remember then. I think you were my student for like a term, and that term was very interesting because I can remember you there sitting down at your desk, always putting your hand up to ask questions, to make comments, to participate. I could remember, I can still remember you being a person who likes to talk, who likes to speak, communicate a lot. So now that you are interviewing me, so I can still smell the flavor of that young girl who was always talking, always communicating, always curious about what's gonna happen next, what's gonna happen the next page, what the future holds, and there you are in the present, uh, witnessing your future at the time.
It is great to receive such compliments, and also that our friendship extended up until today, So I'm very happy about that. And what the audience is also dying to know from my intuition is that I prepared a few questions that everyone would be wanting to ask such an accomplished writer. And I'm going to start with the main one, which is, what are common traps for aspiring writers, for those who want to be a writer?
Common traps. Uh,
Yes.
okay. Well, a common trap is probably, it's hard to say that, but maybe probably to, well, first of all, before talking about a common trap, I would like to say that if you want to be a writer, go for it, right? Go for it because it needs courage, right? I think a lot of people, and I know a lot of people who come to me and say, I would like to be a writer, but I don't know if the quality of my writing is good enough to be published. So uh, I think that there's a lot of courage. It takes, being brave to overcome the fear, the inner fear, the self confidence or the lack of self confidence that every writer has when they first start to write and they want to show what they wrote to other people. I think that's the first barrier that has to be broken, right? So what you wrote to yourself, you wrote by yourself. Now that text that you wrote, if you show it to somebody else, your first reader, so you're breaking your first barrier, and because, and you're afraid of that because every writer is afraid of showing something that they did and other people might not like it. So uh, the opinion of other people based on what you write is something that might hurt. So a common trap is to believe that what you wrote is very good, is excellent, is ready, is professional level, and that probably will never happen, right? Especially to beginners, to writers who are starting to take risks in the area of literature. So if you want to be a writer, write and don't be afraid to show it to other people, and don't be afraid to, if you show it to people who really are honest, right, to show it to real friends or to people who are into literature, don't be afraid to hear that what you wrote can still be better. If they do that to you, that's great. If they don't do that to you, please feel a little suspicious about that, right? That could be a trap, believing that what you wrote is very good because it's probably not.
Oh, and I've been through that because, like, I went for college for creative writing. So I love writing. And when I was publishing my first ebook, my first and only for now ebook, I had to go through all the assignments, and it was a requirement that we published an ebook. And I was always like judging my writing all the time based on the feedback of the professors and everything, and underestimating myself. But at the end, with so much like positive feedback and just like help and support from the writing community, I perfected my skills, and now I'm at Barnes and Noble. I'm at Livraria Cultura. So I think that your first answer was
Yeah,
amazing, and as I said,
I
I
was,
experienced that as a writer.
I think I
So
was talking about. Sorry,
No, you can continue, please.
Yeah, I was talking about how to be, yeah, how to be a writer and to believe yourself, you know, have self-confidence. You said that you as a creative writing student, right? Where did you go to university that? I forgot.
I went to the university from 2015 until 2017 or 18, more or less. I extended a little bit. It was supposed to be a 2-year university in Orlando, Florida. Full
Sorry,
Sail,
I think there's a little delay.
Full Sail University.
Oh, Florida, right? Yes. And you were saying that amongst your professors and yourself, there was a lot of feedback, right? Here and there, showing what you wrote, receiving feedback. Um Ironically, writing is something that you do alone, right, individually. But it is an individual and a very lonely process. But it really works when there is actually more than one person involved in it, and that's what writing and reading is about. It's about connecting people. Although it might look like writing is something that you do on your own, right? You do it on your own, but you do it to others, right? You do it for others. You do it with others, but you're still doing it on your own. But what you do in front of your computer screen, in your room, in front of a blank page, is actually the bridge to other who are behind the blank page. And I think that's the work that a writer should try to make that blank page become a bridge to other people.
Oh, that's great. And you know, Manu Urban Moises, as she said, Anderson is great. My question here would be how and where to start publishing. But I have a question here that kind of relates to what she's saying. And I'm going to go to it now, which is how did publishing your first book change your process of writing?
Right. Okay. So there are two questions there, right? So the person asked how to publish the first book, right? I think that's the question.
She said, how and where to start publishing. And I said, how did publishing your first book change your process of writing? Which is a related question.
Right. Okay. So basically, if this person is in the United States, I think that it is very common for writers to have an agent, and I think that's maybe the best path for you to follow. Right, find an agent, and through the agent. So the agent is the person who more common in America and in Europe than in Brazil. The agent is the person who will read your novel, who will actually talk to you, who will give you advice, who will say to you, okay, this is a very good novel. This is it's ready to be published, or it's not still ready to be published. And when it's ready to be published, the agent will kind of contact publishing houses that might eventually publish your book. So maybe through an agent, that would be the best path, right? If you are in the United States, where I believe you are now, right? Now, you also asked how my first novel changed my writing. Was that your question, Deborah?
Yes, your process of writing. But may I add something to that? A lot of people do self publishing too, which is what I did. For
Yes,
example,
please.
I published on Smashwords and it got distributed automatically into other websites that just picked my book throughout time, and I ended up on Barnes and Noble. So that's also like a way,
Yeah.
or the person can just go on Amazon herself and publish it there if they have something great. Because I have friends who've done that, like they didn't have the means to align with a publishing service, and therefore they publish themselves on Amazon. So if you're just like into wanting to expand your ideas into the world, you can just like self-publish, right?
And the internet's probably a very important tool that we have, right? So there are websites that you can publish your writings, your novels, your poems, and you can get a lot of readers through that. And by having a lot of readers, then that might be something that can spring your writing into a future novel that can be published and printed. So writing online is also a an interesting way for you to eventually have your book published, right? And it's cheap. It's actually free, right? Now, Deborah,
Yes.
you asked about how having published my first novel, how that changed my writing. I think that's what you asked.
Yes.
Well, once you get your first book published, then you kind of overcome that barrier that I talked about, which is to go from your writing into having real readers who buy your books, who spend time reading it, who read reviews. So I think it puts some kind of burden on your shoulders. So you're walking now as a writer, a published writer, with the responsibility of having written a book that has eventually created bridges, that has made connections, not necessarily good connections, but has kind of provoked readers and perhaps has stimulated people to read your novel. I think it might happen to people, to writers, that they might kind of weigh the reactions of readers and kind of start to talk to the way they respond to your reading. And I am sure that some people might actually change their writing style based on readers' responses. I'm not sure if that's something good, but that happens. And it might change, readers' response might change some writers' style. But I still believe that you should be faithful to what you think, to how you feel, to how you work, to how you believe that your writing should look like. Uh, but once you start to write and to have people read and people react and respond, then the dynamics change and it might change your writing, right? It's a very dynamic process, Deborah, and it's hard to say one answer that might apply to everybody. Me, for example, I like to to read critics, to read reviews. I think every writer loves to read reviews about their books, and every writer is kind of anxious when there's a review, especially if the review is not positive. But again, you should read it and respect the opinions of others, the readers and the critics. But still, you have your opinion, and you might change it according to the response. It's a very dynamic thing. I read every review and I try to read carefully the opinion of every reader about my writings, and I'm like that. I like to know that there are people behind the pages that I wrote, and that people have opinions and have feelings and have responses, and I think that is important to me. Now, when I'm writing my next novel, I'm actually not thinking of the responses that people had on my previous novel, but still it's the same me writing, but it's the same me having written other books, writing the next book. Does that make sense to you, Deborah?
It makes total sense. And I'm actually wondering, based on what you said earlier, how many unpublished and half finished books do you have? But I mean, you wrote so many of them, but you must have something that you haven't published. And yet you said that self criticism shouldn't be a thing. So if you have something that isn't published, why wouldn't you have published it, and what's the process of going through that? Because I know at least one person has told me recently that she just didn't have the belief that she could publish her book, you know? So I am thinking that a lot of people have these novels that they just keep in the drawer and they don't publish it for some reason. And I wanted to know if, like, a professional writer like yourself goes through some similar process, and what happens to you in it, for instance, and what do you think happens to those who are just beginning?
Yes, yes. I think writers basically they write all the time. They're always writing. When they're publishing one novel, I mean, it's probably when the book's released. It's probably the final act of a process that started years before, and it's probably when the book's released. It's like months or maybe, I mean, maybe 1 year or maybe more than 1 year after the author has finished writing that book. Now, between that time when the writer finishes writing one book and and the book is published, probably the writer is already working on another book, right? So the writers are always working, always writing, and not everything that writers write is published. Some writers have more unpublished stuff than published books. Um, for example, I believe everybody has just watched the latest Beatles song. What is it called? Forgot what it's called. It's anyway. Everybody, I think the whole world is has watched it, and that was a song composed by John Lennon, who died 43 years
Yeah.
ago, right, and had never been published. So maybe he did not want it to be published for some reason. It was in the drawer, as you said, right?
Yeah.
Now, there's a Portuguese poet called Fernando Pessoa, fantastic poet, right? Died decades ago, 70 maybe years ago. And maybe every year there's a new poem found written by this poet who died 70 years ago. And it's a new poem, right? So I think writers, I mean, they write so much and they maybe published, it's like the tip of the iceberg what they published, right? There's more unpublished than published, which is okay. I mean, there's creativity, but there is the self judgment of every writer, and that maybe stops writers from writing good stuff, but that's not considered good by them, and it ends up not being published, right? I've got a lot of that, Deborah.
Oh, okay. Yes, I totally understand. I think I have tons of unpublished things. Like, I want to write a book of
Yeah.
poems because, like, poetry is my strength. And I still haven't even begun, you know. And it's all in my head. Like, I could just sit down and start writing and it would all come out. But I'm just like a little bit hesitant of going through all the process of, like, publishing. But I am almost done with a book about the Brazilian mythical creature, the Saki, Sassi. Hello, Anderson.
Sorry, you just almost done with the book on the Sassi. Is that what you said?
Yes, on the Sassi, yes. Sassi and the Scouts. I have the illustrations almost ready, and the script is ready, and I just need to format the book, and then just that's going to be my second book. And it's going to be for kids, so it's going to be a different audience. And I'm excited about it. I mean, it's going to be a mythological
Amazing.
novel, but you know, It's great. And now hooking to the other uh, topic we were talking about. What are some authors you're friends with, and some of their work that you could point out, and how did they help you become a better writer? And would you advertise networking? Would you
Okay,
advise
yes.
networking? Sorry.
Advice and advertise, right?
Yes.
I both of them, right? Yes, I think that I have lots of friends who are writers, lots of writer friends, lots of friends writers. But I can name a few, right? For example, how about John Updike, William Shakespeare, Ernest Hemingway, right? Just to name a few. Uh, uh, but also writers like Clarice Lispector, writers like Vinicius de Moraes, writers like João Cabral de Melo Neto, writers like Fernando Pessoa, you name it. The list is endless. And those writers, I know you're not talking about writers who are like, classic writers, but you're writing about like flesh and bone people who are here alive and talking to me, right? And yes, but I cannot forget that writers are basically readers. If you're a writer, you're a reader. If you're a reader, you should read everything, right? The classics, and those are fantastic friends, right? If you want to be a writer, please read the good books, and and I've got a lot of people as a writer. I've naturally have colleagues and friends who are also writers, and by having those people near me, I definitely become a better writer because I hear them. We exchange ideas. I show them my writings. They show me their writings. So there's a lot of interaction there, which you cannot do to people like those that I mentioned before, like Shakespeare and the likes. Um ah, Having like network is essential, right? Is essential in everything. We get to know people, and we get to know people's work. People get to know our work, and there's a lot of interaction and exchange. Literature and writing is also exchange, as we said before, right? Do you want me to name some writers? There are people around the world watching this who might not have heard of, but I'm going to mention a few Brazilian writers,
Yeah, that's cultural.
contemporary
That's
writers,
cultural.
people like, I'm sorry.
That's cultural, so people will be interested.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yes. So people like Luis Rufato is a very good writer. Fernando Bonassi, Marçal Aquino. Those are novel writers. There's Cesar Magalhães Borges, a poet. There's Tiago Costa Franco short stories. So those people are alive and they're writing, they're producing, and I think everybody should be able to read those people, to get to know those people. I mean, those books that they wrote, because reading is about yourself becoming a better person, a more complete person, right? Because I think fiction has the power of putting us in contact with situations, with people who otherwise we in reality would not have the opportunity to be with. Uh, Fiction has the power of introducing to us readers the opportunity to uh, wear the shoes of other people, shoes that we would never have the chance of wearing otherwise. So at the end of the day, I think that fiction has the power of turning us readers into better human beings, more complete, more prepared to develop empathy. And actually, I think literature is a fantastic way of connecting people, and I think we need today. connection. The world needs connections, especially in those days where there are a couple of wars going on in the world. People are being killed by people. We don't want that. We want people being read by people. We want people to be loved by people, right? We want people to respect the differences and accept the differences and live in harmony. I think literature has the power of doing that. If people read more, I believe that maybe the world would have fewer wars.
Oh, that's amazing. And you know what? Referencing to what you said earlier about like having friends with um, the classic writers from the past, I would totally recommend to everyone that wants to have visually that experience the movie Midnight in Paris. I don't know if you've watched it, but it is quite fantastic. And I would recommend it. I totally enjoy it. And it is about connecting with the past writers through time traveling. And I won't reveal much about the plot. Maybe after the live, everyone can do a little research on it. Midnight in Paris with Owen Wilson. So it's quite amazing. And I want
Deborah,
to, yes.
sorry, Deborah. So just because you mentioned that movie, which is one of my
Uh,
favorites, all-time favorites, it's a Woody Allen movie, right? And it's a Woody Allen movie. Who loves literature? Who's an American director who loves literature, and one of his Woody Allen's favorite authors is a Brazilian one called Machado de Assis, and who is an author
oh,
that I think everybody should read. 19th, early 20th century writer, probably the best writer in Portuguese, in the Portuguese language ever. Lots of books translated into English, and he is somebody maybe compared to Nathaniel Hawthorne or Shandy, uh, and uh, and I think Machado just Woody Allen in Midnight in Paris. If you watch the movie, I'm sure Woody Allen read a novel by an American called Ernest Hemingway, who wrote A Movable Feast, and I think A Movable Feast is basically the the seed to Midnight in Paris. So you see, you said that this movie, Midnight in Paris, is
yes,
a good one for what we're talking here about in terms of literature and empathy. And you see how much we can see in one movie, and how much literature there is in the movie, how much fiction there is
yes,
in the movie, how much reality there is in it, right? And how many connections we can make just by mentioning one movie. And we have in that movie, I mean, the whole of the early 20th century Paris artistry world, which would be fantastic. And also an author who was actually already dead, a Brazilian author already dead, Machado de Assis, when all that happened, right? And Woody Allen, the director, did not put Machado de Assis in the movie directly as a character, although there are so many other writers there. Hemingway, who else is there? Oh, there's a lot of writers there, and actually the protagonist is a writer. But Machado de Assis is there because he was hidden behind the camera of Woody Allen, behind the pages of the books that he read. That's it. And we as readers, we should be able to kind of uh, discover or uncover those secrets behind every line, behind every paragraph, behind every page, behind every book. There's a lot of secrets. I think that's why literature and books are interesting, because it's like realizing that what is there is actually everywhere.
oh, that's wonderful. And it's interesting that you mentioned fiction. I wasn't really going to talk about the company, but that's exactly what we do. We mix art, fiction, and real life. So we get someone's moment in real life and we convert it through art means, for example, illustration, animation, songs, and we turn it into a fictional design or story. So, since you mentioned fiction, it's exciting to know that a company like ours has this theme, because I created it as a creative writer with a mind of a creative writer. And it's a company that I am very proud of.
You should be proud of it.
Yes, for sure. And my next question to you is, what's the most challenging thing about writing characters from the opposite sex?
The opposite sex, right? Okay, that's a good question. Difficult to say what the opposite sex is, right? So there's okay. Perhaps we can think about male and female. I mean, there's gender is something that's very there's different nuances, and uh, I'm a male writer writing as a female character. Maybe that's what you're asking,
Oh,
right?
yes, it was a very
Well, if you read my
general, basic
novels,
question.
yeah. So if you read my novels, you will see, or my stories, there is a lot of situations in which a woman is the narrator. Actually, my latest novel is called Teachers. It's called Female Teachers, right? Women teachers. It takes place in a prison in the city of São Paulo, where I live, in Brazil. It's the largest city in Brazil. It's the largest city in Latin America. Brazil is the largest country in Latin America. And in this city, in Sao Paulo, there is a prison whose inmates are there's a lot of inmates from all over the world, female prison, right? Female inmates. And I was a volunteer teacher in that prison for 2 years. The name of the prison is Carandiru. It's an indigenous name. And in that prison, I was a teacher of the Portuguese language to those foreign inmates. And I spent 2 years there who have definitely changed my life forever. I had the opportunity to be in contact with people, with women from countries like, well, you name it, South Africa, Namibia, Argentina, the Philippines, France, the Netherlands. I mean, there's so many of them. Portugal, Colombia, right? And I stopped doing that work in March 2020 when the pandemic started. But those 2 years inspired me to write a novel. It's a fiction novel, right? Uh, in which a teacher goes to that prison to teach the inmates, foreign inmates, to teach Portuguese. You might think, okay, that's you, Anderson, right? And it is, but it's not. And those inmates, they actually end up becoming the teachers of that teacher. So the voice of the teacher, the male teacher who goes to prison, or the protagonist who goes to prison, is actually the voice of the student who goes there to teach, but actually ends up learning. The students who are there as inmates, they are actually the teachers who teach the teachers. So uh, these transfers, these plot twists, uh, these situations in which we readers think that we are going one way, but we're not going another way, are the magic of literature and are the magic of the writing that the writer is also undergoing. So, as a writer, I say that I am my first reader because I don't know what I'm going to write next. I don't know what my next word is until I see it on the screen. So I think there's a magic there that keeps surprising everybody, and it surprises me all the time. Um, Having said that, I love to write stories and novels in which I challenge myself. And one way of challenging myself is making me write in the first person as a woman, uh, because that's what I'm not. When I write, I can be what I am not. When I can be what I am not, I can learn. And writing is like a school. And you can go to that school even if you're not a writer, but being a reader. So being a reader is like going to a school of life. And experiencing being what you're not is probably the best lesson that you can have, because that can change your real life, that can change the way you relate to other people and to the world. So I think it's a great thing to write, to challenge yourself as a writer by putting yourself as a writer in a perspective different than your perspective in your life.
Hello.
I'm here, still here.
Okay. Okay. Your topic raised something interesting. You were talking about plot twists, and I think plot twists are the most exciting moments in a story. For example, on the hero's journey, you know. And I wanted to ask your opinion, like technically speaking, what do you think of plot twists on a hero's journey? And if you could please explain a little bit of those terms to the audience that is not really familiar with it.
A hero's journey is basically the journey that the protagonist has to follow, and that uh, builds their character through the challenges that they have to face in various situations, right? It's the journey that turns somebody into somebody else through overcoming a lot of challenges and a lot of difficulties. That's what we call in literature the hero's journey. And I think plot twists. A plot twist is what also you talked about, Deborah. It's when a story changes, right, completely, and swerves it, and takes and drags the reader with it into the unknown, right, into the in a surprising universe where they did not expect to end up in. I think it's great. It's a great technique, and I think it makes the story interesting. And I think it gives the reader that wow feeling, that wow, right? I think it's wonderful. I like plot twists. I think it's a great strategy, and if you know how to use it, great.
Oh, that's great. So now we're going to start with um, winding down a little bit on our chat, and but it's going to be with very inspiring words coming from you. I hope that the audience really enjoys it. So, for someone who is wanting to initiate their writing career, as we've talked about this topic a lot here on our podcast, so do you have a book, maybe in English, that you know? And I could even recommend one myself, but for screenwriters, that which book do you recommend to build their skills?
For writers. Well, hard to hard to answer a question like that because it's so complex. I think that a book that could be interesting for people who are thinking of becoming writers is a book that has an interesting story, but not only that, a story that's told in a way that it's unexpected, in a creative way, in a way that you say, "Wow, that's interesting. I had never thought of telling a story that way." So maybe an interesting book that can be inspiring for a writer or a prospective writer is a book that connects form and content in a very nice and pleasant way, creative and surprising. Uh, I think inspiration might come from that sort of combination. Now you're asking me to name a novel or a book like that. Ooh. Well, if I
Yes.
tell you that Ulysses is one of them, I'm sure that a lot of people in the audience might say, "Oh, yuck," right? But maybe one or two will say, "Wow." Okay, so if you get a wow from one or two, I think that's great. Even if the vast majority says, "Oh, sucks," right? I think Ulysses is one of them, right? And it has survived maybe a century of yucks, but one or two wows. So you see the power of the wow. And I think that's what you should look for in a book. So which one would you recommend, Deborah?
I would recommend Save the
By the way,
Cat.
sorry, Deborah, I forgot. By the way, Ulysses was written by James Joyce, Irish writer from Dublin,
Oh,
James Joyce.
okay.
Sorry.
Okay, yeah, that's very useful information because the audience needs to know. I forgot about the author of mine, but mine is such a easy one to remember that everyone's gonna know. It's called Save the Cat for those who want to be screenwriters, like write for TV or I don't know, short films if they wanna if they're wanting to experiment with that, you know. So Save the Cat is going to instruct them on the model of writing a script, which is very good. And that's the one I got in college that I like the most because I most of my work are scripts. So I am more familiar with that style.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah, I think
that's a
it's great
very
because you're talking. You mentioned because you can tell me maybe your audience knows that you're a person pretty much involved with audio visual. So you're talking about books and you came up with this movie Midnight in Paris. So you're a very visual person, aren't you? Which
yeah.
is a language that's getting more and more powerful nowadays. The young people now they are all the time looking at a screen like we are now in a screen. It's you and me, but it's the whole world looking at us. So it's very visual. And there's the YouTubes and there's the Netflixes and the whatever you name it, the HBOs of this world, and which are attracting people to sound and image. But what a lot of people don't know is that behind a lot of sounds and images, there are words, and there are words that are written, right? There are scripts, which is what you do, right, Deborah? So you write scripts and rewrite scripts, rewrite stories that might also be translated into different languages, like a movie, like a series, right? But that's also some sort of literature, if you will, right? There's literature in it, and there are writers in it, involved in it. So literature is a lot more than just a book, right? A book is not a book. No, a book is a book is a book is a book.
Yes, but it's also quite challenging because you have to have a crew that will film you. So you also have to have a lot of networking skills and ability to do that. So if you just want to do it yourself, it's better to write a book. So I have gone both ways. Like I've written an ebook to start with, and then I went for a script and had a short film produced. So it was like building my steps up. You know, it wasn't just like right away into scripts. And nowadays, like I even do books with scripts, which is kind of interesting because like when I show the artist the kind of visuals that I want for my novel, they see it through the script and they see it very clearly, And also I do game scripts because our company is developing a game as well called Ghoster, and I do it through scripts. I don't use a traditional format. So, I mean, scripts are useful if you have all sorts of projects, but you also have to build your way up there. It's not something that you're just gonna like start with unless you really dive into studying and just like as I said, read Save the Cat and just have a lot of
Yeah.
passion and determination for it. So I would suggest starting with a book and then like building your way up like I did because it just enriches the experience. I mean, that's my personal advice. And I would
And
like to
it's
thank.
interesting that you, Deborah, you mentioned that the book that inspires you, that you recommend, is called "Save the Cat." Save the
Yes.
cat, right? Which is interesting because the cat actually does not need to be saved, because the cat actually has the courage, has the wit. The cat has the determination, and most importantly, the cat in English has 9 lives. In Brazil, a cat has 7 lives, but in English, the cat has another 2 extra lives. So great, that's it. Cats don't need to be saved, but we need to follow and learn from cats.
Yes, exactly. As we've been both discussing here. And I would like to thank you for coming to our podcast. It has been a pleasure. And thank you for also rejoining us through the hotspot. It has been great to have you back. We were all super worried, like, where's Mr. Anderson? But you're back, and it has been amazing. And I hope that everyone here has been entertained and also informed by you and me, I hope. And I would like to invite everyone to follow the channel because every week we're going to be streaming with artists of different segments, and it's going to be very fun.
Yes, thank you very much, Deborah. Thank you for inviting me to be part of your program, of your podcast. Very nice to interact with people from the podcast, from I'm sure the various countries watching us. And if anybody wants to follow me or know a little bit about my work as a writer, my website is www.andersonborgescosta, altogether, as you can see there, small letters, .com.br, andersonborgescosta.com.br. I'm on Instagram, hashtag Anderson Borges Costa 1. All right, I'll be happy to interact with anyone and exchange some ideas. Thank you very much.
Mr. Anderson, can you repeat your website?
Yes, right. It's www.andersonborgescosta.com.br. Anderson Borges Costa, altogether, small words, andersonborgescosta.com.br. Instagram, hashtag Anderson Borges Costa 1. My website is in English as well, right?
Anderson Borges Costa dot one Instagram.
On Instagram, it's hashtag Anderson Borges Costa 1.
Oh, one. Okay, because I'm writing here for everyone to see.
Ah, okay, cool.
Okay,
And
so I hope everyone takes a
because if I write
screenshot
here in the chat
here.
box,
Sorry, Mr.
if I
Anderson.
write on the chat box, will you be able to see it? Because I can't see what people are writing.
Oh, I don't know that. um, it's my first podcast, and you're the guest star that we selected. So We're just starting out on this journey of interviewing artists, and we hope that it's going to be wonderful for everyone. But I already wrote your website and your Instagram, and I hope that everyone takes a screenshot of their of the live chat, and I'll say bye to everyone now. Bye bye. Have a nice day, everyone.
Bye bye. Good weekend.